Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Business Bites Navigating the Launchpad. It's going to be our last Business Bites event this year. We're super excited and thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Jack and I'm thrilled to see so many people live right now. For those who may not be familiar with us, Haunted House is more than just a co-working space. It's a community designed to foster creativity, collaboration, and the entrepreneurial spirit. Our mission is to provide an inspiring environment where ideas can flourish and connections can thrive. What makes Haunted House truly special is our unique blend of cafe culture and professional workspace. We offer affordable workspace options that are accessible to everybody, from students like myself to freelancers and seasoned entrepreneurs. Whether you need a quiet space to focus on collaboration or to brainstorm with your team, we have the perfect environment for you. But we're more than just a place to work. We're deeply committed to being a hub for the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Additionally, we host events like today's, which provide invaluable opportunities for networking and learning from industry leaders like Kelly. As you navigate your own Launchpad this afternoon, I encourage everyone to take advantage of the connections you make today. This is a space where innovation meets collaboration, and we're excited to support you on your journey. Now I'm delighted to hand over the stage to my co-host, Kelly, who will lead us through today's program. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jack, and thank you to everyone for joining us live in the meeting, or for those of you on live stream. We are really thrilled to have you, and if you happen to be one of the many people who watch this on the recording after, we do want to encourage you to connect and follow with us on LinkedIn, as well as connecting with us locally live at Haunted House in Newport Beach when we're there. We always love the opportunity to connect with community and get your feedback. So thank you for tuning in. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be here today with Shelly Icona and to be really leading this conversation around the strategies for the successful launch of products and programs. And we really want to set the tone for this conversation around tips, really keeping it conversational. So if you do have questions, if you're here and something bubbles up, know that we'll have 15 minutes at the end of today's chat to take those questions and answer them live. With that said, I'm really very fortunate to be here with Shelly and have the opportunity to talk with her about this very important topic. And so just to give you a bit of a framework, we'll be starting off with a focus on some best practices, an overview of what product and program launches are. And then we'll really jump right in to some tactical tips and tricks for how to drive success, specifically thinking about how the changing technological landscape is shifting how we launch products and how we manage to launch those products in a way that creates customer stickiness and satisfaction. We'll keep it fun and conversational, and we do look forward to talking with you. So thank you. And with that, let's jump right in. Shelly, I'm going to come to you first and ask you, assume that there's some people who are watching on our live stream who've never launched a product or launched a program. Maybe you can give us a little context of what a product or program launch is.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, and thanks everyone for being here, listening in. It's so funny when I think of a launch, I get a visual of, the rocket on the launch pad, a SpaceX launch, going out, and really, that's just one super small part of what goes in to that event, right? It's everything leading up to it, the event itself, and then everything that comes after it. So what defines a launch to me is really a process that involves a lot of activities. So a strategy, people, a list of activities, and a lot of research and planning for taking something to market, whatever that is. And so that's really how I think about a program or a product launch. And the things that you do change based on if it's a product or a program. based on the organization and the type of organization, and based on what type of customers you're serving and what type of goals you have in that launch.
I think that's really helpful, Shelley. And I think so many people share that visual, that imagination of the moment of, hitting go, adding an app to the app store, or imagining that rocket lift off. But it's a lot of the pre-work, the customer sentiment testing, the thinking about what problem we're solving, thinking about what differentiates us and how we enter that market. Ahead of that button, I think that really predicts how likely a product is to be able to have that wow factor when it launches. Um, I can think of many times where there's been a tremendous amount of work and then the rocket doesn't get to blast off. And so I think that as we're having this conversation today, um, part of our goal is to talk about what makes a successful launch. How do we make sure that when we're ready for the rocket to take off and we finish that countdown, that the rocket gets to take off and it gets to land successfully again? And so maybe you can talk a little bit about success and what that means in the context of a product or a
That
program.
is a great point, and something I've been grappling with a little bit as we see in this volatile market we've been in. A lot of products and companies that take these products to market are essentially closing. So what does it mean to have a successful launch in a company? How long does the runway need to be existing for that success to exist? And I think when I think of a successful launch, I'm thinking about the outcomes that we set forth for that specific product and for that specific program. So we're not going to boil the ocean here. So if we have, a new television that we're going to take to market that has some really cool new features and a new type of display, and we know that there's these new features that customers want and need. Meeting those customer needs and wants is one outcome that we hope to achieve, and ensuring the longevity of that product in the market, ensuring that what other technologies need to exist to support that technology in the market, that hardware, that software, the things, the broadband, whatever that piece of technology relies on, exist also are required for that to be successful, right? Thinking about all of that is critically important to ensure that it has the runway that we give it. So it's a period of time. It's not something that's going to last forever. We know that the laptop that I'm using right now has a life, and the launch of it is a success because I'm using it as a customer. I happen to love it and be a brand loyalist. But at some point, it will be obsolete to me, and I will look to another product in that brand's suite, and hopefully they will keep me as a customer and have that customer loyalty for me to adopt another one of their products.
Thanks, Shelley. I think one of the things that you said that really resonated with me in that is about the idea and the concept of loyalty, and also the time-based nature of success. And so, just as you said, when thinking about the launch of a product, that there are different variables based on the stage of the organization, the size of the organization, the customer being served. I think one of the things that really stands out to me is it's the team that's launching something that decides how they want to measure success. But it's also the user that has this exchange that gets to also decide if the product met expectations. And it's that interplay between the two that I think is really fun and is sometimes missed when we're thinking about program design, especially with that sort of founder persona. So if you're tuning in, and I know a few of you on the live stream are tuning in, and that founder mindset, a way to think about the customer that's really important is to think about the problem that you want to solve, that you have the greatest opportunity to solve with the least friction. So in a market where there's a lot of volatility, how do you reach the customer you want to serve, solving in a meaningful way a problem that they want to solve with the least friction to being able to get that early traction? And I think that that's a really helpful context for success. So as we talk about that, I want to come back. I want to come back here and talk about why are we talking about this. So Shelley and I gave you a bit of an introduction. If you're familiar with Business Bites, you probably know Shelley and I and the On Its Axis team. But if this is your first time tuning in, I thought I would give you a slightly different introduction today. Shelley is the founder of On Its Axis, and wearing that founder cap that I was just talking about, Shelley, maybe you could speak to a little bit about your founder mindset when you originally talked about On Its Axis, and then a little bit about how On Its Axis has evolved to serve customers today.
Absolutely. You know, my background was in engineering and program management, and then I moved into product management, and wasn't really thinking about building a company, but more about consulting and helping other organizations build better products. So going from the engineering side, way back when, we weren't really looking at customers and market testing and feedback loops. And so when I moved into consulting, I got to do a lot of that work and I loved it. And through those consulting engagements, I heard, well, we need more of you, or we need these types of roles. Do you also do this? And from there, and in my conversations with you, Kelly, we decided that it made sense to grow, join forces and grow the company. And so today, I refer to you as my co-founder because we really have, a product division, a people division that you brought on. And now we have another division of process around business process automation and digital transformation. But that story is one of constant evolution and one where you have to always be disrupting yourself. And so just like thinking about a successful product or program launch, starting and running a business is really no different. You're always having launches of your own. And I look at quarterly and yearly planning, and I think you would as well. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as a leader in the company. We're always planning our own launches and shifting how we talk about things and based on what our clients tell us, our customers. What do they need? What do they want? What are they saying is most important and top of mind? And how are we ensuring we meet them where they are in serving them and their unique needs? It's not very different from building a product and launching a product or program.
I think that's such a wonderful introduction. And hopefully, if you're listening in, what you're hearing is that there's this life cycle. Um, there's timing of being able to meet the market. There's timing of anticipating where the market will go, and a part of that is about measuring. And Shelley talked about quarterly reviews and annual reviews, but there's also systems of micro testing of the audience. And I talked about how we're going to talk about program and product launch in the context of the changing technological environment. We're able to do tremendous research on who we're trying to serve in very rapid pace. I remember when I was first working in mergers and acquisitions, and we were diligencing teams to buy, and it was this painstaking multi-month process to try to understand behind the scenes um, how a company would fit in to the ecosystem of what we were trying to build in our portfolio. Today, technology lets us do that in reverse. We're able to really rapidly understand gaps in the market. We're really able to rapidly understand what customers need and want. And so it reduces assumptions around build and time to build, and really lets us as a team very rapidly predict how to serve customer need. And so that interplay that we talked about before, is moving. You see me zoom in and zoom out. I think that that's what's happening on the interplay a little bit. Is there's this shift in how we think about launch. And so the next phase that we're going to go into in our chat together is talk a little bit about um, with the world moving really quickly, how do we as a team that wants to bring something new to the market, whether this is the very first time, like Shelley, when she was first thinking about stepping out of working in corporate to being a consultant, how did she enter the market? Or this is your 15th product and you're trying to think about how to launch that new product so it stays on brand or so it reaches an entirely new brand. And so we're going to start with this idea of defining the launch stages. And I'm going to come over to you, Shelley, and just have you talk a little bit about how do product and program people think about the stages of a launch?
Right. So I'll focus more on I guess, the delivery side, because that's more where I spent my time in a corporate setting. So not on sales and business development, but more on, product program and engineering. But really, a product person's role, and this is, changing a lot, especially right now. Product management is going through lots of challenges, and I'm hoping a bit of a rebirth here, but they're really focused on what the customer needs and wants. And they're bringing that back and saying, these are the priorities. This is what we should be focused on. Sales knows they can sell it. And we have empathy for this customer. We believe that giving them these features and functions will be sticky, and they'll be repeat loyal customers. This is the time frame with which they need it. Program managers and project managers design a plan and go work with the engineers to deliver it. And what's happening today is everything's changing around how all of that happens. And it's quite remarkable. The tools that are being used for the intelligence gathering around research and sort of what we call customer discovery, new customers that we might attract for our, say, product, new product development, the research that we do and how we go about it, as well as how we go and build a schedule and deliver that schedule to take something to market is changing. So the stages kind of remain the same, but I think how we do the dance of managing throughout the life cycle is changing quite a bit. And on its axis, when we have team members that are out working on behalf of our clients, they're having to ramp up in this new world and flex different muscles, so to speak, I would say, both on the hard skills side and the soft skills side, to figure out how to best deliver within these defined launch stages. And those are the nuances that I think are particularly interesting at this stage of launch. Kelly, I'll throw it back to you, and what do you see? Because you're talking with a lot of these folks as we bring them into these organizations. What are you thinking about the launch stage and how it might be shifting to accommodate this new world of work.
I think you really summed it up nicely um, in the description of flexing different muscles. I think um, once upon a time I was a PMP, a certified PMP, and there was this very specific timeline for each phase, right? So you'd have ideation, and there was a very specific timeline, and then development and testing and budget and execution, and there would be some estimated sort of early adopter awareness cliff to sunsetting a product. And you would know that all before you went out with a product to market. And over the last sort of 10 years, there started to be this concept of iteration. And now I really see what I'm calling a permutation, where there's permeability between the phases. And so I love the visual on this slide because it shows that there's concentric circles, that while one product is in the market, there's some user testing and accessibility and watching that's helping to inform ideation for the next phase. There's there's this interplay in products and product lifecycle um, that allows us not just to work in that linear project plan path that we used to work on, but instead really starts to work in these sort of concentric circles. It's a lot more three-dimensional than it used to be, and launches are a lot more focused. So that's my 2 cents on it, and I'll just jump along um, from defining launch stages to planning and strategy development. So, if we've got these concentric circles, how do we plan? How do we think about research and market analysis? And how do we set goals if we're, let's say, a nonprofit? We've been talking a lot about the tech organizations, but let's pretend we're a nonprofit organization and we're thinking about running a new program, and it's a program that supports people in the group immediately adjacent to where we've been supporting. So let's say we've been doing work with the foster youth system, and we decide we want to launch a program to support people who are aging out of the foster system. So people who are now 18 to 26 years old. Um, if you were to meet with the executive director of this group, Shelley, and you were to sit down and help them think about some goal setting, do you have any tips for a group like that?
Well, I think really understanding the audience you were serving is critical, right? To figuring out how to serve this adjacent audience. And also being clear about the differences, right? Because it's not a one size fits all approach. Um, and I think this is where empathy and human-centered design is really, really important. And I think people talk a lot about doing that work, but they often sort of overlook it as, oh, we did it, but it's very time consuming. This part of the life cycle, probably the most time consuming because it involves meeting with and genuinely getting to know the people that you most want to serve, right? And so not making assumptions about what they need or how or what their persona is, or the day in the life of them, what their goals are, what their challenges are, the tools that they use, um, what their biggest pain points are, right? We can't make assumptions about that. We can have hypotheses, but we need to do the work to sort of validate and invalidate those as a first step.
That's great. Really great feedback. And then, you know, part of the hypotheses working correctly is this idea of testing and measuring for success. Do you have any tips around establishing performance criteria and some best practices on that?
You know, I love, there's KPIs and OKRs and SMART goals, and I think they're all different ones are different, are used for different reasons. And so here we've got KPIs, key performance indicators, and they're great. They're indicators that we're looking for. And what they should tell us, though, is they should be indicators that we're in the right direction. And so for them to be usable, they should tell us if we're off track. And I find a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, I've created them with a specific intention in mind, not thinking about what happens if I don't hit it, or what happens if the indicator is telling me this won't happen. And this probably ties a little bit into some risk mitigation piece that we'll go into, but I think the key here is indicator. What indicator am I looking to measure success? And at what level, if we look at that tape measure, how far along do I have to be to say that I'm in a success measure? Maybe it doesn't need to be the highest number. Maybe it can be somewhere along the line. And I think too often it's an all or none scenario for us. And I think sometimes we make it too difficult to succeed by not setting it up right in the first place.
I think that's such an important point, particularly when I think about venture-backed startups or large companies that are launching a new commercial endeavor, where they set a really sizable budget that sets up indicators that don't leave room for early pivots, because so much work goes into the strategic development, that they need such a large pool of data to be able to determine, are we successful or not? And so you mentioned earlier that the market is shifting and there's a number of companies that are going through consolidations right now. And I think that those consolidations are an indicator of not setting metrics for success based on the modern opportunity for hypothesis and testing. And I think what I mean by that is, if any of you are still on social media, I know some people are on a hiatus from social media right now based on some numbers of social media views. But for those of you who are, you've probably seen and been streamed in advertisement at some point for somebody who said, I've let AI take over my ads. And these are very much targeting e-commerce businesses. And they say, week 1, I had 3 sales. And week 2, I had 32. And week 5, I had 132. And it was because AI was able to make all of these assumptions around who I should be serving and what my hooks should be. Now, what's really happening there is something called micro testing. And whether you're doing it or artificial intelligence is making the assumptions, it's a number of hypotheses and then key indicators that are being measured with a pivot decision. So if this happens, then I test this combination. And that style prevents you from saying, I'm going to reach 1,000 people with this big push to market on a big brand launch, that if it falls short, my rocket starts to go up with the countdown and then the rocket doesn't launch. If that falls short, doesn't leave a lot of places to pivot. And that's really the difference, is this sort of micro testing. And so as you're thinking about what is the right measure for success, I would encourage small budget tests initially as you're concepting new ideas to decide market penetration, market opportunity, market audience, to get those early adopters. Setting the metrics for success is followed by us really spending a little bit of time together around best practices and team dynamics. And so Shelley mentioned earlier, I have a focus on the people side of our business at On Its Axis, and both internally and on the customer side, people are the difference between a program and a product taking off and a program and a product falling short. And we've talked a lot about this idea of testing. And Shelley mentioned briefly the concept of human-centered design. Shelley, I would love for you to just give a quick intro to what is market research, and what do you mean when you say human-centered design for anybody who might not know?
Yeah, I mean, in market research, we're really looking at the market that we want to serve, what the personas, the people that we want to serve, who are those people? Where do they spend their time? What are they buying? What are the purchase cycles? And there's types of market research we can conduct. There's qualitative research. Oftentimes that's like a focus group we can run. There's interviews and surveys. There's observational we can do. We've done a lot of these where you're watching someone interact with something and you're seeing how they navigate maybe a product or maybe how they're using something. That's just to get an indication of their experience. And what's great about it is you get to see something through their eyes. And that type of research is really important to expand your view around how you're thinking about how you can serve that specific group of people. There's also quantitative research, which is a little bit separate. There's competitive research, which you can do on how your competitors are serving the market as well. So market research is very broad, but it's very important. And when we think about human-centered design, it's more about taking the research that we've done and designing or brainstorming potential solutions to solve specific problems around those individuals' use of whatever it is that we've observed. So we can take watching someone, you know, interact with different models for how they might use a pointing device for a computer, right? We call this a mouse, but I mean, there's many different ways. How do we think the mouse evolved to a trackpad, to pointers, to some of these other solutions? We've watched people and we've watched how they interact. We've listened to their feedback on how their bodies have enjoyed or not enjoyed that experience. And then we've come up with different prototypes to suggest how do you find this as an interaction? How do you find this as a design? And so that process is very time consuming and doesn't have to be, though. It can be rapid if it's structured in a way that's done correctly, where it has the right upfront, the right people involved, and the right upfront research at the onset.
So I think that that's a really great feedback. And I'm not sure whose phone is ringing at the moment. So somebody's dialing in to say hello. And this is what I would say, just to make it real for people. If you think about a phrase Shelley talked about earlier, she said it's a bit of a dance. And you think about you you get a concept for who you want to serve. And typically a founder or a product team in a company, they want to build something new because they have a connection to the audience. They have an insight that they think that uniquely positions them to provide a solution to a problem that the audience that they care about is trying to solve. And so, that group of people comes together and says, I want to solve this problem. I want to understand how to how to reach this customer, usually they have a lot of opinions on it. And so that opinion becomes a hypothesis. But that opinion, great, because it can start us down a path, is narrow because it comes from the position of the group that's been serving. And so one trick for an optimal outcome in this idea of human-centered design is to check with the audience to see if they're on the same page about how something gets served. And I love the idea of thinking about soap, because soap is something, regardless of where we are in the world, we can think about. And soap is a great product because there's a lot of ways that soap is dispersed. There's a lot of different types of soap. You can have bar soap, you can have powdered soap, you can have concentrated soaps, you can have soaps in the form of bubbles or bath bombs or bath salts. And you can have body washes and body washes that are now perfumed. All of these are soaps and they all serve people, but they segment the audiences that they serve by solving for a very unique need and use case for soaps. Some of you who are listening in may have a hobby of enjoying cars and may want a soap that very clearly cuts through grease, or maybe loves bikes and very clearly cuts through grease on bikes. The idea, if you're launching, is to know the audience you serve, know how your soap differentiates from other soaps, know if it's unique, and have some process to test it to see if the angle that serves the segment that you're trying to reach is unique enough to truly be able to serve that audience. And I think when you're thinking about people, you need enough people on the team that understand the audience, that they can be reached. But then you also need enough diversity and perspective, both from the audience that you're trying to reach and the team that's coming together to solve the problem, to be able to be creative enough to come up with a new way to do soap. During the last kind of 5 years, we started to see fast dissolve, no water free soaps become wildly popular in the world, right? So 5 years ago, those soaps existed, but who we marketed them to. Water-free soap solutions suddenly became a very common solution. And I imagine probably about 50% of the people tuning in or who watch this recording probably have now some version of an antibacterial hand wash that they have in their possession, that they own. And many of you probably have them as giveaways that you've received at corporate events that you've attended. So the idea of soap is an example of a launch. There's still needs and there's still room for innovation, even something that's been around and has been done by so many different companies in so many different ways. And diversity of team is a great example of being able to help navigate that. And so fostering a team internally that isn't all based on the same approach. So you don't want a team of just product managers or just engineers trying to solve a problem. Likewise, you don't want a team of just salespeople trying to solve a problem. And I think if you're in either of those categories, you can probably think of some reasons for why that might be problematic. Shelley, coming back over to you, one of the things that's very true for our team at On Its Axis, we're a remote first team. We have been for a long time, is this concept of collaboration. It's one of the core values for our company. In your opinion, why is collaboration important to successful product and program launches? And how does it show up differently in the world we're in today versus maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think collaboration is the lifeblood of a company in a lot of ways because it keeps people engaged. I think work is work. I mean, some people love their work, some people find work to be challenging, and work is a necessity. But I think collaboration is what makes work sticky, is what makes it fun, is what makes the creative aspects of what we do. so rewarding. And I think without effective collaboration, we run the risk of frustration, rework, um, and missed deadlines, loss of profitability, operational inefficiencies. So I'm a huge fan of collaboration. 10 years ago, we were more in person, and I've always been a big proponent of having think time, and think time for me meant being away from an office, maybe being in my home office, coming up with my planning, coming up with things, and then being together for meetings and whiteboarding and all of those things. And so even 10 years ago, that was a challenge for a lot of companies, and that was a challenge for a lot of teams to know how to work like that. I think in recent years, we've been forced into that. And I think that a lot of digital collaboration tools have emerged to support that effort. I think we've come on board with it. And I think younger generations have naturally adopted and helped older generations be better proponents of those tools. But I think it's really important to constantly evolve um, in collaboration, whether we're in person, hybrid, or remote. And I think it's more important that we know how to collaborate effectively, whatever tool we're in. It doesn't really matter, but that we know what our own procedures are together as a team, that we've communicated enough to know how to collaborate together. I think it's more about the how than anything else. And that how, getting to the how involves some conversation.
Great. I think when I was thinking about the number one benefit of digital collaboration versus in person, and thinking about this topic of collaborating for successful product launch, it allows room for insights from not just people who like to think out loud, but people who are really contemplative, people who need to take time to engage and play with an idea before they provide feedback. But digital tools, asynchronous collaboration creates room for those people to have a voice in the workplace in a way that we didn't have the opportunity for. And study after study shows that creating space for diverse thinkers in the workplace creates more successful project outcomes. It allows people to think about what's our next topic, which is really what happens after we've started to build the plan and we're starting to think about how to execute on a program. It allows people to think about risk management and how this might show up in the world in a way that teams that are building a launch plan around live, synchronous, rapid communication maybe didn't have the capacity for, because loudmouths like me who love talking and love thinking out loud take people down a path and leave out some blind spots. So one of the things collaboration allows for is for us to identify potential pitfalls that might show up in a product or program launch. Shelley, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this and about why it's important to be thinking about pitfalls as you're thinking about program success.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we think of like the launch stages, or we say we'll go waterfall for a minute and we do like initiation, planning, I'm forgetting my PMP. Maybe you can help me. Initiation, planning, executing, controlling, and closing, something like that. It's probably changed since I got mine, but there were always inputs and outputs and checklists. And I loved that because each one of those phases we had risk mitigation plans to get to the next phase. And I'm not saying we need to be so structured in our product or program launches, and we probably shouldn't be, but we really do need to be thinking about, if I wasn't fully comprehensive in my market research, um, did I miss something, or did we miss something as a team? Do we just need to call that out, right? And we just need to account for that, because it's better to know what we know and call that out and account for it than to sort of fly blind through launch and post launch and have that come up by, some senior level stakeholder in a debrief, or what some call a postmortem. So, it's really about thinking ahead, being proactive, identifying what potentially could come up. And even if we missed something, we've accounted for it. And it's no different than, I'm driving to Northern California to go do this speaking event, and I don't have a warning light on my car, but it's not running just totally great. I am not going to have time to go get it checked out. This is not a true scenario, by the way. I'm not going to have time to get it checked out. But I can manage that risk, right? There's no warning light. It's a newer car. I'm probably good. If other factors were presenting, the warning light was on, it was an old car, the mileage was up, I've previously had a problem, the weighting on that risk would go up, and maybe I would have to execute a plan B, find another driver, carpool with someone who I know is going, figure out my flight in lieu of driving, et cetera, et cetera. So the risk mitigation plan is so often overlooked, and it's super important, and it's really necessary for adequate planning. And what it does is it bolsters it's your insurance plan is what it is. It's your launch insurance plan.
That's great. One of the things we talked about in the last slide was not having teams that are homogenous, not having teams that have all one type of functional role from a company working together to build a product. One of the other elements of this and identifying potential pitfalls that is a real execution best practice is to not have just a set data set when you're thinking about launch. You really want to look at recent customer feedback blogs, bring somebody in from your customer success team and ask them about trends they've been seeing and how people have been using the product that you currently have on the market to be able to understand if there's another common use for a product that you didn't think about that is actually accounting for a percentage of your customer purchase. Really building diversity in the data set and in the team help you to get a broader set of understanding of what the potential risks are. And then if you're using Shelley's example of thinking about driving and you know that your car isn't running quite right, and you know that you need to get to a certain place by a certain time and you don't have time to get it checked out, then you're thinking about your contingency plan. You're bringing in, is my AAA up to date? Is my, um, do I know the common 5 things to check in the car and just listen to that blog the first 20 miles of my drive, just in case? These are things that would be an example of avoiding pitfalls. It's better to be safe, better to have a bit more information, but manage that against your timeline. Manage it against trying to get to execution. We're rounding out our time together, and so I want to make sure to just focus on this. The key concept there is being proactive versus reactive. A trick to a successful launch is to proactively think about your contingency planning, building in check-ins and feedback loops, ensuring that you're not thinking about the approach to the plan from a tunnel vision perspective, but you're looking at it holistically, and you're thinking about how do we make sure that we're inspecting what we expect throughout the process instead of just in that closure phase, instead of in the post-launch phase, ensuring that throughout the process, you're able to quickly respond to challenges. And that's a trick that the current market lets us have. Shelley, I'm going to come to you for a final element before we go to Q&A, which is just thinking about this idea of successful launches. Um, why does this approach work? What differentiates it, and can you provide an example of how taking this sort of more proactive approach benefits teams and companies?
The feedback loop
Yes.
approach. Yeah, I mean, look, when you put something to market, you've done the research to suggest that you're going to have success, but you don't actually know that. And early numbers may show positive return, but unless you're working with your customers to understand if you're meeting their needs or exceeding them, there will be fall off, that you're not going to meet every customer's needs. So you really want to ensure that the feedback loop that you have works for your company so that it the process by which customer feedback gets to the right team members, whether that's your customer success team and your customer success team is feeding that back into your product team, and your product team is weighting and scoring potential changes that might need to go out or fixes that might need to go out, and reviewing those on a regular basis to ensure that those customer needs that are surfaced in the feedback loop get addressed in social media posts. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new release, a new launch, but it definitely needs to be addressed in different ways. Maybe it's a customer support channel, maybe it's an email campaign, and maybe it's something more simple like social. But ensuring that your customers feel heard and that their needs are at least understood to the point where you can respond in an effective way is very important to ensure that the launch was in fact a success, and that the goal of the launch is realized over time.
That's great. I would love to open it up now to questions. I'm looking on my, if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at my other monitor for streaming questions as well. So if you're live with us and you have a question, feel free to drop it in chat, and then in the stream as well. Mm. Shelley, we got one in the stream. Can you explain the steps to establish effective product positioning? So thinking about product positioning.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm going to use an example. So product positioning, to me, I think marketing uses, is it 4 or 5 P's about, there's like positioning, price, it's about messaging, it's a few factors, but the way I think about it is this product that's in the market resonates with me as a customer. I like the messaging about it. I like the way that I like the product. I like the way it's messaged. I like what it stands for. I like the price of the message. And I'll give an example because I think there's a lot of nuances here. Every January, and when I'm doing maybe a run or a bike ride, I don't drink any alcohol. But I love beer. So occasionally I'll do a non-alcoholic beer during that period. I was never interested in non-alcoholic beers. They didn't speak to me. the positioning, and this is a plug for Athletic Brewing. We would love to work with you. The positioning of Athletic Brewing was absolutely perfect. Going to an expo, a race expo at one of the local marathons here, race expos, the day before, there's Athletic Brewing. That's absolutely perfect. You're targeting athletes who care about training, they care about recovery, and a carbonated and carb heavy drink that's a treat after a race or after a training run is absolutely perfect. That models to me wonderful positioning. It's in the right place. It's with the right people. It happened to be at the right price. And I'm sure there's other things that marketers would tell me it needed to hit. But from a product perspective, it had great positioning. And that's one example of many that I can think of that I call on regularly when I think of product positioning.
It's a really, really great answer. I'll just chime in. You got most of them. So pain, price, position, place, perks. So what's the benefit to the user that you're trying to reach? And so it has to solve a problem. It has to um, have a segment. So you need to know who your customers are. You need to have an alignment between the perks being offered and the price being charged and the capacity of the audience you're serving. And you have to have a channel to reach that audience. And I think that that's a really great answer to the question. We have one more question that I'm going to send. It's also for you, Shelley. And it's about how to build resilience. So you talked about how the market is shifting, and we talked about how some companies are failing or consolidating through that. Do you have any recommendations for building resilience to handle the changing demands of future launches?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be focused on continuous improvement to stay in the market and to flex your resilience muscles. I think some ways that companies are doing that is, those that grew too fast, maybe they have too many locations. Maybe they need to think about de-investing in locations and reinvesting in ones that are working. I think Starbucks is an interesting example. CEO of Starbucks is a local Newport Beach leader, and Brian Nichols. And I think, going out and meeting with customers, really understanding how to bring more customers into Starbucks, to stay in Starbucks. Those are continuous improvement models. And that's, directly at the top, doing that work, really getting his hands dirty to figure out how to really unlock new opportunities within Starbucks as a corporation. And then differentiation around your products. So back to Athletic, not only did they develop a company, not just a product, a non-alcoholic beer product, their whole company is non-alcoholic beer. They've been so successful because they're developing craft beers around, you know, types of communities or different celebrations, or they're working with local breweries or brewers in different communities and having artists develop labels. And people that love beer and love supporting local and happen to be non-alcoholic beer drinkers are buying those products. And so they've really tapped into their champions, their customer champions, with continuous improvement. And I think it's remarkable. So there isn't really a one size fits all approach. to continuous improvement and resiliency, but resiliency absolutely involves working with your customers to figure out what they need, want, and sometimes demand.
What a wonderful place to end this session and this year. Shelley, thank you so much for answering all of the questions live. Thank you to those of you who are live with us here on the webinar and also who are listening in on stream. We appreciate you. And I want to say thank you to Jack for your participation and partnership. Hana House is an incredible partner in this series, and we look forward to 2025 ahead. If you're not already following on its axis, Hana House and Shelley Icona, please start following them. Stay tuned for an incredible program of free advice and solutions in the year ahead. Jack, over to you if you have any final thoughts.
My final thought, I thought this was amazing ending to this year's series. I'm so happy I got to work with you and Shelley. Thank you guys for putting this on, and stay tuned for updates for next year's Business Bites.